Hey there, welcome. Tonight, we're unraveling Viking hygiene, because smelling like a god might not be what you expect, and keeping people at arm's length might just be part of the plan. Get comfortable, and let's begin. You wake up on a bed of straw and sheep pelts, the ceiling beams above still holding the scent of last night's hearth smoke. The longhouse stirs quietly around you, the muffled sounds of early rising, the soft clang of a kettle, the creak of a wooden door, the unmistakable throat clear of someone who definitely slept too close to the fire. And before you even consider sharpening your axe or polishing your shield, you do what every self-respecting Norseman or Norsewoman does. First thing, you head outside for a wash. Now, let's pause to realign expectations. You don't saunter into a ceramic-tiled spa with a eucalyptus diffuser in the corner. Instead, you trudge to the nearest stream, which is, how shall we say, motivationally cold. But to the Viking mind, this is invigorating. You splash your face, rinse your hands, and scrub behind your ears with a small rag that feels roughly like it was woven from bark. You're not alone, either. All around the settlement, others are doing the same. Morning hygiene is a group effort. Modesty exists, of course, but practicality usually wins. Despite the modern stereotype of Vikings as unwashed brutes dripping in blood and beard oil, actual records suggest otherwise. Contemporary accounts from Anglo-Saxon monks and Arab traders often note how obsessively clean the Norse folk were, particularly when compared to, say, medieval Englanders who feared that water might invite demons into their pores. No, the Vikings washed regularly, and not just when they smelled like old fish stew. Here's a historical fact to tuck under your arm like a neatly folded towel. The Norse word laugardug means washing day. That's where the English word Saturday comes from. They set aside a full day for soaking, scrubbing, and communal bathing, long before anyone uttered spa day unironically. Baths were held in hot springs where possible, or in makeshift tubs filled with heated water and optimism. And yes, there were hot springs. Iceland, in particular, was a geothermal gift from the gods, where settlers soaked in naturally warm waters while trading gossip and lye soap recipes. Archaeologists have uncovered wooden bathhouses and even stone-lined tubs, suggesting hygiene wasn't just for special occasions, it was routine. But here's your quirky tidbit. According to some tales, warriors bathed before battle, not just to honor the gods or calm their nerves, but to look impressive while dying. Because if you were going to Valhalla, you might as well smell like spruce resin and ambition when you got there. One preserved letter from an Irish monk complains that Norsemen washed too often, making them dangerously attractive to local women. That's right, Vikings, the original bad boys, with great skincare. Now, historians still argue whether these accounts reflect the norm across all Norse societies, or if they were simply exoticized by other cultures. Did every Viking bathe regularly, or just the rich ones with access to streams and soap? It's hard to know. Records are patchy, and let's be honest, nobody wrote down a footnote that said Thorofell smelled lemony fresh today. Still, your day proceeds in accordance with Viking protocol. You finish your rinse with a quick splash of water to the back of the neck, a sort of Norseman's espresso shot. The cold rushes over your spine, wakes your muscles, and briefly makes you question your life choices. Then comes the drying, which is a mix of air, wool, and vigorous hand flapping. No fluffy towels here, just a woolen cloth that doubles as both drying rag and emergency bandage. Of course, water alone doesn't quite cut it. Vikings used soap, specifically a homemade blend of animal fat and ash, forming a crude lye that could strip oil from skin and dignity from unclosed hands. More on that later. For now, you return to the longhouse, hair damp, skin tingling, feeling oddly smug. You smell like cold water and slight pine, which, in Viking terms, is practically divine. Back inside, someone's lighting the morning fire, the smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. You nod at a fellow villager who's sharpening a knife while sipping something that might be beer or weak onion broth. It's hard to tell before breakfast. Clean and awake, you're ready to face another day of farming, trading, and possibly hitting someone with an axe if things escalate. But you'll do it while smelling, if not heavenly, at least notably less like a compost heap than your enemies. And that's a start, isn't it? You sit by the hearth, your hair still slightly damp from the river, and begin the most sacred morning ritual after washing, untangling your battle beard. Whether you're sporting a chin thicket worthy of Thor himself, or a modest tuft that hints at facial ambitions, yet unrealized. One thing is non-negotiable: you comb it, and not with your fingers or a borrowed stick. No, you reach into your personal pouch and draw out a small, finely carved comb, usually made from antler, bone, or even walrus ivory if you're feeling extravagant. Yes, Vikings carried combs, constantly. Archaeological digs across Scandinavia have uncovered hundreds of them, stashed in graves, dropped in latrines, or nestled into household rubbish piles, like the discarded selfies of a well-groomed people. These weren't cheap throwaway things, either. They were decorated, durable, and some even folded like a Swiss Army knife, with just one incredibly specialized function: taming hair like a legend. So, you comb, gently at first, then with increasing urgency, as the knots reveal just how dramatic you were in your sleep. And it's not just vanity. Lice were very real, very hungry, and very committed to their lifestyle. Combing was less a beauty choice and more a frontline defense against becoming a human buffet. The fine teeth of these tools weren't there for aesthetics. They were practical, functional, and occasionally borrowed to groom one's eyebrows or mustache into shapes that might frighten the English. Historians still argue whether these grooming habits were mostly about health, mating, or sheer Norse pride. Some believe that public grooming was a social marker, a way to display discipline and status. Others suspect it was simply practical. When you're wearing the same wool tunic for weeks, your hair better pull some weight in the hygiene department. As you work through a stubborn tangle, a neighbor walks by, their beard braided into elaborate coils that would make a modern influencer weep with envy. Beard styling was practically competitive. Some Norsemen treated their facial hair like living banners, weaving in beads, metal rings, or bits of bone like miniature war trophies. You could spot a chieftain by his beard's complexity, or possibly its gravitational pull. You pause to oil your hair with a dab of something herbal, thick, and suspiciously goat-scented. Viking hair oils weren't always fragrant in the traditional sense. Animal fat was the base for most, often mixed with pine, resin, wild herbs, and sometimes a pinch of ash for color or hold. Want a bit of fringe trivia? Some warriors darkened their beards with crushed charcoal to appear older and more fearsome, especially the younger lads trying to climb the social ladder from goat boy to axe guy. And don't think the ladies of the longhouse were exempt. Viking women also had combs, oils, and braiding techniques passed down like heirlooms. Hair was often worn long, styled into thick plaits, or pinned up with ornate brooches. Clean, brushed hair was a mark of respectability. Dirty, unkempt hair, well, let's just say it gave the village gossips something to do. There's an old Norse saying, loosely translated, that goes something like, "Better to be naked than unloved. Better unloved than unkempt." That's a cultural motto worth embroidering on a pillow, isn't it? You finish combing and turn your attention to your fingernails. No clippers, of course, just a small knife and a steady hand. Vikings weren't big on long nails. Dirt under them was considered a bad sign, not because of germs. Germ theory wouldn't be a thing for another millennium, but because it suggested you didn't take pride in yourself. And in a world where reputation could mean life or death, appearance mattered. Quirky tidbit for today. Some Norse folk kept grooming kits in leather rolls that included tweezers, ear spoons, and even toothpicks. Miniature hygiene multi-tools, centuries before the Swiss got involved. One particular set, found in a grave near Birka, included a tiny spoon designed to scoop earwax. Whether that's practical or horrifying is up to you and your personal relationship with Q-tips. You pack away your comb, run a hand through your now obedient locks, and stand. Outside, the day's chores await. Fishing nets need untangling, goats need wrangling, and someone's already yelling about a barrel of fermented herring exploding in the storage hut. But as you stride into the day, your hair combed, your beard oiled, and your fingers mostly intact, you carry the quiet power of someone who knows that the first battlefield is the mirror, or, in this case, the shiny side of a bronze bowl. You step out into the bracing morning air, your boots crunching lightly over gravel and damp straw, and the scent hits you, smoke, pine, and something that could politely be called earthy. Your neighbor's outhouse is definitely overdue for a shoveling. Still, compared to cities of the same period, like Paris, where people were flinging chamber pot contents out of windows casually, this little Norse village is practically a spa. Sanitation in Viking times was surprisingly nuanced. You don't have plumbing, of course, or fragrant soaps with confusing ingredient lists, but you do have designated waste pits, wooden outhouses, and the highly underrated art of not dumping things in your own drinking water. That alone puts you several centuries ahead of some future civilized societies. You head toward the edge of the village, where the latrine trench runs along a discrete slope. These were communal, often shielded by wooden walls or woven reed panels, and maintained with as much dignity as you can muster when your job involves shoveling feces into compost heaps. Still, it's honest work, and you whisper a silent thank you to whoever last remembered to toss in some sweet-smelling moss. Now here's the quirky bit. Viking latrines weren't just for relieving oneself, they were sometimes social hubs. Not unlike the modern office water cooler, they were where gossip was exchanged, deals were hinted at, and, occasionally, songs were sung. Some sagas even allude to entire verses composed mid-defecation, which, frankly, raises questions about artistic inspiration. You pass a fellow villager, hauling a bucket of grey water from the kitchen. It sloshes with the sort of viscosity that tells you last night's stew had ambitions far beyond its ingredients. That water's headed for the waste pit too, not for the garden, unless you're deliberately trying to poison your cabbage. Historians still argue whether Viking hygiene was more advanced than that of their medieval successors. Some point to the frequency of bathing, the presence of tweezers and combs in nearly every grave, and the relatively low density of settlements as evidence. Others caution that without written sanitation codes, most practices varied widely. Either way, you feel rather smug knowing you're not stepping over sewage-filled alleys. After your latrine visit, yes, you looked away at the important moment. You check the pit privy log that's usually left by the door. This wooden stick has small cuts carved into it, marking when someone last tended the trench. It's your turn in 3 days, and you already dread it. Still, better you than Olaf, who once dropped his knife in the waste and spent a week trying to cleanse it with pine, resin, and prayers. Wiping in Viking times. Well, let's delicately wander into that swamp. Moss was the go-to option, soft and absorbent and helpfully abundant in northern climates. If you were feeling fancy, or perhaps just desperate, scraps of wool or even smooth river stones were employed. The term natural lifestyle takes on a different hue when you're scrubbing your behind with something you once used to pack a wound. There's also archaeological evidence that some people used oyster shells for the task. Now, whether that's true or simply the result of historians confusing midden heaps with privies, no one knows. If accurate, it makes for a rather uncomfortable luxury. Better moss than mollusk, you reckon? As you walk back to the main path, you pass by a row of dwellings with their turf roofs dotted in sheep, like particularly judgmental lawn ornaments. Outside one of them, a woman is boiling water in a soot-blackened pot. She's making lye, a common Viking cleaning agent. You'd never guess it by the caustic smell. But this mix of wood, ash, and water will soon become soap, gray, crumbly, and strong enough to clean both your tunic and your sins. Soap making was mostly a domestic art, passed down like recipes or curses. Viking soap was more utilitarian than aromatic, with the goal being grime removal rather than delicate fragrance. It could sting, especially if the lye concentration was off. If you've ever accidentally washed your hands with industrial cleaner, you know the vibe. Quirky aside, some sources suggest Vikings bleached their hair with a mix of lye and crushed chalk. Whether for fashion, lice control, or a desire to look like thunder-powered surfer gods is still debated. But the result was distinctly Nordic, flaxen-haired, fur-clad warriors with complexions paler than a ghost's handshake. You stop at a communal water barrel and splash your hands, again, with the icy, mineral-rich spring water. It's cold enough to give your knuckles something to complain about, but clean. Nearby, a bundle of drying cloths flaps gently in the wind, each dyed with madder, root, or woad, stained with ash, or just left their natural beige-brown hue. Laundry day isn't glamorous, but at least the water here doesn't smell like a fish funeral, unlike some cities down south. Before heading off, you grab a few sprigs of wild thyme growing by the fence. You crush them between your fingers, the scent strong and sharp, and tuck them into your shirt like an all-natural deodorant. It won't win awards, but it might prevent someone from accidentally seating you next to the sheep again at supper. Thus armed with moss, thyme, and a healthy fear of oyster shells, you stride into the day with surprising confidence. You may not have a toothbrush or a bottle of lemon verbena hand wash, but you do have soap that burns like judgment. Neighbors who understand boundaries around waste pits, and a personal grooming kit that would make a modern minimalist jealous. And really, what else do you need? The sun is crawling higher now, spilling its pale light across rooftops crusted with frost, and you decide it's time to tackle what the gods and your grandmother would call personal upkeep. Not the heroic sort with swords and roaring, but the humbler battle, grooming. This is where Viking hygiene shines, or at least twinkles bravely beneath a layer of soot. You retrieve your grooming kit from beneath your sleeping bench, a modest leather pouch containing a bone comb, tweezers, a small pick for your ears, and a blunt scraper that looks suspiciously like it was once part of someone's dinnerware. Not a toothbrush in sight, but you're not going in blind. You've got traditions. You start with your hair. Viking combs are carved from bone or antler, often decorated with tiny incisions or runes that say things like Thor, bless this scalp, or, more realistically, property of Ivar, touch and lose a finger. The comb's teeth are so fine they'd give modern lice a nervous breakdown. You drag it slowly through your tangled hair, wincing as it snags. Somewhere in the strands lurks the ghost of last week's campfire smoke, but you persist. Cleanliness is a war of attrition. Historians agree that Vikings were meticulous groomers, particularly compared to their European contemporaries. They bathed weekly, often on Saturdays, a habit so consistent that the Old Norse word for Saturday, lagerdagur, literally means washing day. This amused Christian monks, who couldn't quite fathom why pagans were cleaner than priests. One even wrote that Norsemen had an unfair advantage with women, because they were always clean and well-groomed. Imagine losing your girlfriend to a guy named Bjorn because he actually used conditioner. Now, you pick up the ear scraper. The tool is small, curved, and deeply unsettling the first time you use it. Still, you'd rather this than spend another feast half-deaf from earwax buildup. There's something oddly satisfying about the little scrape as you clear things out. And no, you don't ask where the wax goes. That's a problem for the gods. Tweezers come next. You pluck at your eyebrows with the precision of someone trying to remember what eyebrows even looked like before all the ash and wind and helmet straps. There's no fashion magazine to guide your shaping, only instinct and a vague desire not to resemble an angry squirrel. Your nose hair gets a gentle yank or two as well, because yes, even the mighty care about nostril aesthetics. Then comes the teeth. Ah, yes. No minty paste, no soft bristled ergonomic handle, just a sturdy twig, whittled at one end until it frays, and a bit of ash rubbed into it for abrasion. You chew it, twist it, scrub with it, hoping the charcoal does its thing and not just rearranges yesterday's meal. There are whispers that some chewed willow bark instead, which, thanks to salicylic acid, has mild pain-relieving properties. Whether that was a happy accident or a stroke of dental genius, historians still argue. You've heard tales of a man who cleaned his teeth so vigorously with birch bark, he ended up with a smile like polished bone and a mouthful of splinters. Whether that's legend or just cautionary tavern talk remains a mystery, but you avoid birch all the same. A fellow villager wanders past, his beard glinting with frost and pride. He carries a grooming kit not unlike yours, plus a thin knife with an ivory handle, used to scrape beneath his nails, or perhaps threaten anyone mocking his split ends. Facial hair is not merely tolerated here, it is cultivated. Beard length says a great deal about your rank, patience, and, occasionally, how recently your wife stopped speaking to you. You nod to him, and he returns the gesture before meticulously separating a braid. You both understand this ritual. To look unkempt is to dishonor the body the gods gave you, or at least to risk having a scald compose a mildly insulting verse about your dandruff. You wash your face with cool water and a scrap of cloth, using soap only sparingly. It's not because you're stingy, it's because lye soap burns if used too enthusiastically near the eyes. You learned that the hard way, and the goats laughed. Quirky fact. Some Viking men are said to have applied animal fat mixed with ochre to their faces, creating a reddish hue considered attractive or intimidating depending on the occasion. Whether it was war paint, proto-blush, or both remains debated. What's certain is that few people mocked a man greased up like a roast pig and wielding a sword. The final step in your routine is fragrance, or at least the effort toward it. You crush dried mint leaves between your palms and pat them under your arms. Others might use wild rosemary, juniper, or, for those with access to trade goods, even imported frankincense. Perfume oils were occasionally worn in pendants or stored in hollowed-out beads. One chieftain's grave included a small vial of ambergris, which, if you're unfamiliar, is essentially whale vomit used as a fixative in perfume. It smells oddly divine. Eventually, you sniff your armpit. Not terrible. Better than last week. You're ready. Personal hygiene in your time isn't just about vanity. It's deeply social. To arrive at a gathering smelling like a bog-dwelling troll is to insult your host. To show up clean, groomed, and lightly aromatic. That's how you signal respect, self-worth, and just maybe, courtship potential. Nothing says worthy suitor like a man who can wield a sword and a comb. And so, you return your grooming kit to its pouch, tie your hair back, and step outside again. The wind has picked up, fluttering the wool sleeves of your tunic, but your face feels fresh, your beard tamed, and your teeth less likely to frighten the livestock. You are a man, or woman, of balance, warrior and washer, layer and scraper, ready to face the world, one whiff at a time. The morning mist hasn't yet surrendered to the sun, and your boots find their way to the edge of the stream, where you'll soak a tunic that smells more like a bonfire than clothing. You crouch, dipping the coarse wool into the icy water, and begin scrubbing with the brisk efficiency of someone used to working with numb fingers and questionable soap. Laundry, like glory, waits for no one. This is where the magic, or rather the lie, happens. Your soap is homemade, just like everything else in your life that isn't stone or stolen. It's a hardy gray brick made from wood, ash, and animal fat. And yes, it smells exactly how it sounds. The scent clings to your fingers, and when you raise your hands to your nose, you're not sure whether it's the soap or last night's stew that's wafting back at you. Still, the soap works. Lye eats through grease, which is useful when you're washing tunics that have absorbed weeks of reindeer fat, peat smoke, and a splash of mead. You lather it in, not worrying about suds. Viking soap doesn't bubble like modern stuff. It sort of smears, but it does the job, as long as you're willing to beat the fabric like it insulted your ancestors. The truth is, Vikings were far more concerned with cleanliness than their reputation lets on. Most owned combs, tweezers, and ear spoons, and weekly bathing was a given. Archaeologists have found grooming tools in nearly every grave that wasn't a complete disaster site. And not just from nobles, farmers, warriors, even servants were buried with their hygiene kits. Because no matter your social rank, no one wanted to be the one in the mead hall reeking like a troll's backside. You rinse the tunic and spread it out on a flat stone to dry. Beside it, your socks, woolen tubes, stiff with sweat, cling to one another like trauma buddies. They'll be scratchy when they dry, but at least they won't itch from actual parasites. And speaking of parasites, let's talk lice. You've met them. They're tenacious. These days, everyone's got a theory. Boil your tunic, freeze it overnight, stuff it in an anthill. That last one is your cousin's method. He claims that ants do the job in minutes and even carry away the carcasses. Whether that's efficient or deeply disturbing, historians still argue. Today, you try a more traditional method, laying your garments near the hearth and hoping the radiant heat murders anything with legs. It has worked before. Well, mostly. There was that one time the smoke flushed a family of fleas into the food stores, but you've blocked that from memory. As your laundry dries, you make your way to the communal hot pit. This is not a sauna, strictly speaking, but it's about as close as it gets. A shallow, stone-lined trench filled with water and heated by superheated rocks. You and a few neighbors take turns tossing in stones, which hiss and crack before sinking. The steam that follows hits your face like a wet slap from Thor himself. You strip down, not completely of course, because modesty still has its place, and lower yourself into the hot pool. It smells faintly of moss and old boots, but your muscles hum in appreciation. After days of hauling firewood, sparring drills, and chasing that one goat with commitment issues, the warmth seeps into your bones like forgiveness. The hot baths, in many Norse settlements, were used not just for bathing, but for gossip, strategy, and occasionally matchmaking. A well-timed bath might help you overhear a neighbor's trade plans, or a man across from you, let's call him Fraudy, cleans his armpits with a rag, muttering about his wife's complaints. He claims she says he smells like a fermented mushroom. Better than a dead one, he grumbles. Everyone nods, solemnly. Marital harmony through soap, one bath at a time. Mainstream scholars agree that bathing played a key role in Norse domestic life, but some fringe theories suggest that certain herbal steams were used ritually to cleanse not just the body, but the spirit. Whether this is true, or someone just got very into mint leaves and imagination, we may never know. Your bath ends with a cold rinse, because nothing says I'm alive like an Arctic splash to the face. You emerge dripping and invigorated, though slightly concerned about what's growing between your toes, probably moss. Again, you dry off with a rough linen cloth that exfoliates you in the same way sandpaper might, but the itch means it's working, probably. And once you're dressed again in clothes that don't crunch when you bend, you feel like a whole new warrior, one who might not win every battle, but will at least smell vaguely like birch smoke and pine sap instead of wet dog. The wind picks up as you leave the bath, carrying the scent of fresh bread from a nearby hearth. Your nose twitches. Clean clothes, clean skin, and the promise of carbs. You might not live forever, but this morning feels like a victory. You pause to adjust your belt, eye your drying tunic, and then look up at the sky, now streaked with gold. Somewhere out there, a battle rages, or a boat creaks across stormy water. But here, now, you are warm, washed, and free from lice. For now, the scent of fresh bread trails you into the longhouse like a helpful spirit, and you follow it with the reverence of a pilgrim. But first, time for your beard. Yes, the mighty facial mane, worshipped by poets and feared by small children. Yours is more than decoration, it's a social contract. You don't just wear it, you maintain it, ignore it, and it will turn on you like a cat with trust issues. You reach for your grooming kit tucked inside a carved box by the door. Every tool is bone-handled, worn smooth by years of use. There's your comb, fine-toothed and unforgiving, and the tweezers you use to deal with the unibrow you definitely didn't ask for. And there, gleaming faintly in the firelight, is your prized beard pick. Crafted from walrus ivory, it's shaped like a tiny rake and just as aggressive. The combing ritual begins with oil, of course. You dab on a mixture of goose fat and crushed juniper berries, because if your face is going to smell like anything, it might as well be forest and poultry. The mixture softens the wiry hair, and as you tug the comb through the tangles, you reflect on just how violently a beard can rebel when left unsupervised. Now, here's the mainstream historical fact for this segment. Combs like yours have been found across Viking Age graves, from Dublin to Birka. And not just among warriors or chieftains. Even the most rugged fishermen knew that appearance mattered, especially in cultures where status was worn on your face, sometimes literally. Across the room, a younger lad hacks at his chin stubble with a rusted knife. You wince in solidarity. The things people do before steel razors and dermatology. He sees you watching and shrugs. Trying to impress Ragna, he mutters, "Ah, young love, and early inset follicle trauma." You finish grooming and admire the result in the polished bronze mirror nailed to the support post. It's a bit wobbly, and your reflection looks mildly haunted, but your beard is glorious. It fluffs like a well-fed squirrel and smells vaguely medicinal. You are now technically edible by Viking standards. Of course, hygiene isn't limited to the beard. You shift focus to your nails, currently a shade of brown that would make a soil sample blush. With a knife tip, you scrape the grit away, careful not to gouge yourself. There's honor in scars, but not when they're self-inflicted via fingernail excavation. You're not alone in this little grooming session around the longhouse. Others are engaged in their own quiet rituals. One woman plats her hair with bone beads, another oils her scalp to chase off the winter dryness. Someone's brushing their teeth with a frayed birch twig, chewing one end to form a bristle. It works, mostly, and at least it doesn't taste like fish. That brings us to a quirky tidbit. Did you know Vikings may have dyed their hair? It's true. Lighter hair was idealized in Norse culture, and some used strong soap or even lye to bleach their locks. The downside: hair that snapped like old straw and scalps that probably felt like a sunburn dipped in vinegar. But beauty hurts, even when you're raiding monasteries. Now, you may ask, where does all this emphasis on grooming come from in a culture so obsessed with war and glory? That's where things get fuzzy. Historians still argue whether Viking hygiene was primarily about vanity, social signaling, or health. Some posit that looking good was part of asserting dominance. A clean warrior was clearly winning at life. Others think it was simply practical. After all, lice don't care how many swords you own. Back outside, you spot Bjorn, the old, sharpening a blade and simultaneously picking at his scalp with what looks like a deer rib. It's hygiene, multitasking at its most creative. He nods at you and gestures toward the fire. Come, dry your beard before it freezes into a helmet. You sit by the hearth and let the heat do its thing. Your beard steams gently, and you wonder what kind of spell this would be in a saga. The warrior of the smoking jaw has a nice ring to it. You lean back, belly full of heat, hands idle, thoughts drifting. As the room quiets, someone begins humming a lullaby. It's low and rhythmic, like the thrum of a ship's hull. You can't place the words, but the tune is old, older than even the stories. It makes you think of snow-covered forests, of mothers braiding hair, of the quiet moments that fill the spaces between battles. A dog snores near your feet, twitching in a dream. You reach down and scratch behind its ears, noticing that even it seems cleaner than usual. Someone must have dunked him in the stream, brave soul. Then comes the scent of pine again. Someone tossing fresh branches onto the fire, not for heat but fragrance. It mingles with the aroma of sweat, oil, and the faint temps of lye, creating something that almost smells holy, or at least survivable. In this place, in this moment, personal care is not luxury, it's ritual. You are clean, groomed, braided, buffed, and just a little bit burned from the beard steam. You're ready. Not for war, not even for romance, but perhaps for something better, a shared meal, a good story, a night with warm feet and no bugs. Your bones hum with the comfort of it. You blink slow by the fire as the pine scent curls through your nostrils and settles in your brain like a lullaby with good posture. Your fingers brush your now dry beard, which crackles faintly with pride. Across the longhouse, someone tosses a rag at a child's head and shouts, "Wash your ears, or Odin will fill them with bees," which is both motivational and absolutely terrifying. The cleansing rituals wind down, and it's time for what might be the most sacred hygienic rite of all, the weekly steam bath. You gather your linen wrap, slightly damp, slightly scratchy, utterly essential, and make your way toward the bathhouse. Not every Norse settlement had one, but you're lucky. This village is built around a hot spring-fed stone hut, which doubles as a meeting place, gossip den, and makeshift truth zone when people are too naked to hold grudges. The air outside bites. Snow falls soft and slow, each flake auditioning for a poetry recital. You clutch your wrap tighter, boots crunching in rhythm as you approach the low-slung hut built from thick slabs of turf and stone. Steam leaks from the doorway like a ghost with punctuality issues. Inside, it's chaos. Blessed, sweaty chaos. The heat wallops you first, wet, enveloping, and aggressive in a comforting sort of way. You remove your wrap and take a seat on a bench worn smooth by countless behinds. Around you, warriors, farmers, grandmothers, and that one guy who always brings pickled fish sit shoulder to shoulder, glistening and red-cheeked, talking over one another like a family of slightly inebriated ravens. This is no modern spa with quiet playlists and cucumber water. This is a furnace of honesty. Arguments happen here. So do apologies. And fart contests. But those usually fizzle once the temperature climbs into sweat lodges from hell territory. You ladle hot water over a pile of stones in the center pit. The hiss that follows is both threatening and oddly soothing. You inhale deep steam mixed with birch leaves, ash, and a hint of someone's regrettable choice in wild garlic shampoo. The sweat starts almost immediately. It trickles down your back, past every old bruise and memory. Now, here's your historical anchor. Archaeological digs across Scandinavia have uncovered bathhouses with drainage systems, benches, and soot marks. Signs these weren't occasional indulgences, but part of weekly routine. Vikings bathed far more often than their medieval European neighbors, a fact that surprised even their enemies. In fact, Arabic accounts like those by Ahmad ibn Fadlan mention the Norse obsession with washing, particularly their habit of sharing communal basins to rinse their faces, though he was less impressed that they didn't always change the water between turns. You reach for a bundle of birch twigs, vita, they call it, and start lightly whipping your arms and legs. It sounds masochistic, but it's more invigorating than painful. It stimulates circulation, exfoliates dead skin, and gives you an excuse to slap yourself with greenery. Win-win. Across from you, a large man named Jorand does the same, though his technique is more theatrical. He looks like he's auditioning for a forest-themed musical. Here comes the quirky fringe tidbit. Some Viking-age people may have used animal urine in their cleaning routines. As a natural source of ammonia, stale urine could be used to bleach clothes, or, disturbingly, to treat stubborn grime on skin or hair. It's a theory supported by a handful of saga references and remains debated in scholarly circles. Though, to be fair, scholars probably don't like to picture themselves scrubbing with pee either. You take another ladle of hot water and toss it on the stones, feeling the blast of fresh steam punch the room like a moist fist. The air grows thicker. Your thoughts float upward with the heat. Around you, the conversation quiets, then drifts into half-lucid murmurs. One man speaks of dreams where dead ancestors combed his hair. Another says he saw a raven blink at him in perfect rhythm to his heartbeat. There's something mythic about it all. Historians still argue whether these sweat rituals were purely for hygiene or held religious meaning. Some interpret the bathhouse as a liminal space, a place between worlds where truth was easier to find and bodies were shed of more than just grime. Others argue it was just a practical means of staying clean in a world full of mud. Either way, you feel lighter now, not just from the sweating, but from the shedding. Layers of tension, dirt, and perhaps the mental clutter that accumulates when your life is measured in winter lengths and spear points. A horn is blown faintly in the distance. Time's up. You stagger outside with the others, wrapped again in linen, and face the snow. This is the part you secretly dread, and also secretly love. The plunge. You stride barefoot through the crunching white muscles tingling, heart pounding, and dunk yourself in the cold stream behind the hut. It's pure, glacial madness. You yelp, loudly. A nearby squirrel freezes mid-run in what is probably judgment. The cold grips your lungs like a god hand, then releases. You emerge, gasping, alive, new. Your skin tingles, like it remembers something you don't. Steam rolls off your body, like you've just survived a dragon's sneeze. Back in the longhouse, you warm your feet near the fire, still damp and humming with the wild euphoria of being thoroughly scrubbed, seared, and reborn. Someone hands you a cup of hot mead. You sip it and grin. You smell amazing, and by Viking standards, basically irresistible. Your hair is half dry, smelling faintly of juniper and birch smoke, as you sit in the longhouse, nursing your hot mead. The steam bath has wrung you out like an old tunic, and now you're caught in that delicious in-between state, not quite sleepy, not quite ready to move, brain gently simmering in a broth of post-sauna clarity. Around you, conversations drift lazily through the rafters like incense. No one's in a hurry. Everyone's skin glows like they've been kissed by a benevolent sun god with good skincare advice. And that's exactly what you needed, because next comes the real trial of hygiene. Clothes. Yes, even the cleanest Viking isn't done until their outerwear stops smelling like it fought a bear and lost. Laundry day in Norse society was a full-on tactical operation, with soap made from animal fats and wood ash, stiff scrubbing boards, and buckets of icy water that made fingers go numb faster than you could say someone else's turn. You gather your linen undertunic and wool overcoat, both now airing out near the hearth. These garments were worn close to the body and took the brunt of daily funk, meaning they had to be cleaned more often, though not always successfully. Viking soap, lye-based and caustic, could get the job done, but wasn't exactly delicate. Clothing wore out fast, which is perhaps why you only have 3 shirts to your name, and one of them is mysteriously missing a sleeve. Historical fact incoming. Archaeological finds at sites like Birka and Hiddeby confirm that Viking clothing wasn't just about warmth. It was layered, functional, and often stylish. Men and women both wore linen or wool undergarments, with tunics and cloaks fastened by ornate brooches. And those brooches, half the time, they doubled as status signals and low-key weaponry, fashion that could stab you. Very on brand. You lay your tunic flat and begin brushing it with a bundle of dried horsetail plant. It helps lift dirt from the fabric and polishes the weave. The smell isn't bad, earthy, grassy, with a hint of damp field mouse. You'll take it over fermented herring any day. Speaking of which, remember the fringe tidbit about crocodile dung being used as ancient Egyptian birth control? Well, here's a Norse equivalent in absurdity. Some scholars argue that stale beer mixed with crushed lichen might have been used as a sort of deodorant paste. There's no definitive proof, just fragments of descriptions and odd residue found in ancient pots. Still, if your armpits ever reek of ale and moss, maybe you're just ahead of your time. You lean in closer to the fire, letting the wool dry thoroughly. This isn't just vanity, it's survival. Damp fabric in winter is basically a personal invitation to frostbite. And lice, oh lice, the bane of Viking hygiene. You take out your own comb, simple, smooth, and with just enough nicks to suggest it's been through a few battles of its own. You drag it through your beard, wincing as it snags on a knot that could probably qualify for maritime navigation. This is no casual grooming moment. This is warfare. And here's where things get interesting. Historians still argue whether Viking grooming habits were more about personal pride or public expectation. Some posit that appearing clean and well-dressed was crucial for social standing, especially when trying to marry off your third cousin to a jarl's niece. Others claim it had a ritualistic bent, with grooming and adornment tied to beliefs about spiritual cleanliness and protection. You pluck a louse from your sleeve, flick it into the fire, and mutter something about Freya's patience. Around you, others comb in silence, lost in their own rituals. The crackle of the hearth, the occasional cough, and the rhythmic scrape of combed teeth create a kind of lullaby. Your neighbor, a wiry, one-eyed leatherworker, leans over and offers you something wrapped in cloth. You unwrap it to find a hunk of sulfur soap. It smells medicinal, strong, like someone tried to weaponize cleanliness, but it works. You nod, thanks, and begin scrubbing your hands with it, noting how the smell clears your sinuses like a slap from Thor. Personal care products were not unknown to the Vikings. Perfumed oils and combs made from imported materials like walrus ivory have been found in trading hubs, suggesting grooming was both widespread and, in some circles, a bit fancy. Imagine turning up to a feast smelling like imported frankincense, while everyone else smells like goat pen and bad choices. Instant legend. You rub oil, rendered from animal fat and infused with herbs, into your elbows and knees. This isn't luxury, it's preservation. Dry skin cracks. Cracked skin festers. Festering isn't very godlike, unless you're aiming for the undead aesthetic, in which case, go wild. There's a small mirror shard passed around, polished bronze, not particularly flattering, but honest. You peer into it. Your beard is tidy, your skin no longer glistening with week-old stew sweat, and your eyes, though tired, hold the glint of someone who's just declared war on bacteria and mostly won. You smile. Not bad for a man who once cleaned his ears with a fishbone. The night outside deepens. Stars glimmer through the thatched gaps of the longhouse roof. Somewhere near your feet, someone's carving a comb, muttering about the price of walrus ivory these days. You tuck your now sweet-smelling tunic into your travel sack and lean back against the wall, feeling more human than you have in days. Clean, dressed, and nearly smug about it, you yawn wide. In the hierarchy of Viking survival, food, shelter, warmth, hygiene may not have been top of the list, but by the gods, it made the rest of it more bearable. You awaken to the familiar aroma of roasted barley and peat smoke, laced with something less poetic. Your neighbor's boots. Despite your evening hygiene heroics, the longhouse remains a complex symphony of odors. But you smell like a god among men, mostly, at least until the goats wander in again. The morning routine begins. There's a rhythm to it now. Splash face with cold water, rub in a bit of the leftover animal fat salve, scrape under nails with your dagger, carefully, and inspect your clothing like a medieval airport beagle, sniffing for contraband. Your wool cloak passes the sniff test, barely. You decide to wear it anyway. It's too cold not to, and your vanity only stretches so far. You step out into the chilly dawn, boots crunching on frost-hardened earth. You pass others in similar states of grooming, ranging from freshly polished to charmingly feral. And here's where the social layer of Viking hygiene shines. It's not just personal, it's performative. Bathing regularly, combing your hair, and wearing clean clothes weren't mere self-care. They were woven into the fabric of community standing. A clean man was trustworthy. A clean woman was marriageable. A clean warrior might even intimidate an enemy who assumed anyone that fragrant had their life alarmingly together. Mainstream historical fact alert. Arab chronicler Ahmad ibn Fadlan, who encountered the Rus, often associated with Norse settlers, described how these Northmen bathed every morning, combed their hair, and cleaned their nails meticulously. You tighten your cloak and head to the riverbank, where a handful of other early risers are tending to the livestock. One of them, a flaxen-haired shield maiden named Yrsa, greets you with a nod and the faintest wrinkle of her nose. It's hard to tell if she's impressed or trying to identify what blend of herbs you used. the rosemary from yesterday's roast, the sage you mistakenly used as toothpaste. Hard to say. While others muck out the animal pens, you busy yourself boiling water for laundry. Because no matter how many oils or herbal compresses you apply, if your tunic smells like you slept inside a damp badger, you've lost the war again. Nearby, an elder woman tosses dried juniper branches into the fire. The smoke carries upward, curling around the laundry as it steams. Juniper wasn't just for scent, it had antibacterial properties, and it made the longhouse smell less like fermented eel and more like a Christmas funeral, which is something. Here's your fringe fact for the day. Some Norse communities believed that bathing in springs visited by elves or huldafolk could grant health or beauty. These supernatural spa treatments might have been less about hygiene and more about ritual, but if it meant fewer boils and shin rashes, who's arguing? You turn your tunic inside out, scrubbing at it with a makeshift brush of pine twigs. No need for detergent commercials here, just old-fashioned elbow grease, hot water, and a fair bit of muttering. You notice Yrsa watching you with what might be amusement. You mutter louder. There's laughter from the other side of the fire pit. A younger lad's tunic has caught an ember and gone up like dry moss. The lesson is immediate and memorable. Always check for hot coals before drying your only good shirt. He pats the smoldering fabric and winces at his newly acquired air vents. Historians still argue whether the obsession with cleanliness was born from practicality or vanity. In the sagas, characters are often described in terms of their appearance. Shiny hair, finely woven garments, well-groomed beards. Even Odin, the one-eyed wanderer, is sometimes described as having impeccable clothing. Was this embellishment, or a reflection of a society that genuinely cared about presenting itself as divine, even while covered in pig blood? You lift your laundry from the steam bath and wring it out, hands pink and steaming. It smells better, like pine smoke and hard work. You string it up between two birches and watch as droplets fall into the frozen earth, hissing as they hit. The group moves back toward the longhouse. The smell of breakfast, barley porridge, wild berries, and smoked trout replaces the campfire aroma. And just in time. Inside, you pull up a stool near the hearth. Yrsa sits beside you, close enough to notice that she now smells faintly of mint and salt. Not a terrible combination. You trade casual barbs over who managed to keep their tunic in one piece and whose comb has mysteriously gone missing. You're both looking at the goat, clean, fed, and surrounded by mostly tolerable smells. You lean back and savor the moment. The mead arrives in clay cups, thick with honey, and something you're pretty sure is fermented bark. Doesn't matter. It burns nicely. You feel your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by music and firelight, and the heady knowledge that for a moment you are completely, blessedly clean. You settle into the familiar groove of the wooden bench, still warm from Yrsa's elbow, the kind of warmth that lingers longer than strictly necessary. The mead is kicking in, ever so gently, like a bear wearing silk gloves. Around you, the longhouse hums with post-breakfast satisfaction, but the fire crackles with purpose, and you know what's coming next. The Saturday steam. Not a week goes by without the full cleansing ritual, communal bathing, hair washing, and whatever counts for an exfoliant when you're stuck between fjords and cows. You rise from your seat and follow the trickle of villagers toward the bathhouse, if you can call it that. It's more of a glorified hut with a pit furnace, but it does the job. Stones are heated until they glow like dragon teeth, and water is poured over them to fill the air with steam thick enough to hide a saga's worth of regrets. You step inside and let your eyes adjust. The heat hits first, like walking into someone's armpit, but spiritually enlightening. Then comes the smell, pine tar, sweat, and birch branches, the Viking trifecta of spa luxury. You strip down to nothing but your stubbornness and dignity, both of which feel slightly damp already. Inside, Yrsa has claimed a corner near the rocks and waves you over. Others are already smacking themselves with vita, bundles of leafy birch twigs meant to stimulate circulation. You hesitate, then take your own bundle and give yourself a reluctant thwack. It stings, but in a wholesome, I regret all my life choices, but at least my pores are clear kind of way. You sit, steam rising around you, and inhale deeply. Someone adds juniper to the rocks, and the air goes from earthy to intoxicating. And here comes your quirky tidbit. Some Viking Age people believed that sweating out bad spirits through steam could cure not just body odors, but curses. A proper sweat, they said, could banish a foul temper, a lingering illness, or the ghost of your ex's passive-aggressive glances. As you lean back, steam curling through your hair, you think of how all this isn't just about smelling nice, though that's certainly a bonus. It's a ritual. A reminder that you're not just surviving, you're participating in a centuries-old act of communal purification. And, yes, it absolutely beats rolling around in cold river mud with a vague hope the worms get bored. Somewhere near the stones, an elder hums an old tune. Yrsa joins in with a low harmony, the kind that vibrates right through your ribcage. The longhouse may be smoky, and the floor might occasionally crunch underfoot in ways you don't question, but here, in the bathhouse, everything feels clean. Not just externally, but spiritually, scrubbed down with metaphysical lye. Historians still argue whether the Vikings genuinely saw hygiene as sacred or simply necessary. Was the Saturday steam a religious act, or just a good excuse to finally scrape the eel oil out of your scalp? The sagas are vague, likely because they were written by people more interested in dragon slaying than dandruff management. Still, the consistency of bathing rituals across settlements suggests this was more than perfunctory, it was identity. You pass the soapstone, yes, literal stone, infused with ash and lard, between your palms. It leaves a slick residue, but your skin is grateful. And let's face it, ash and lard may not sound luxurious, but it beats smelling like a dead seal in a thunderstorm. Outside, the sun hangs low. Inside, the steam has reached that lovely, too hot to think, but too soothing to care temperature. You lean back against the wall, let your limbs go liquid, and give yourself one more birch thwack, just for tradition. Someone starts talking about an upcoming feast, and you overhear whispers of a visiting chieftain's daughter with golden hair and enough jewelry to rattle when she walks. Yrsa mutters something about overcompensating, and you both laugh, the sound bouncing off the timber walls. There's something therapeutic in communal roasting of both enemies and yourselves. Your skin glows, your hair, now damp and pulled back, smells faintly of rosemary and birch smoke. You feel lighter, not just from sweat, but from the release of another week's grime and grog-soaked sorrow. And that, really, was the magic. The Viking world wasn't a glamorous one. It was muddy, brutal, astonishingly creative, and deeply practical. But within that rugged framework, the Norse carved out rituals like this, quiet, communal, oddly sacred. They bathed not because they had to, but because it made them feel human, connected, almost divine. You rise, wrap yourself in a still warm cloak, and step outside into the evening chill. The cold bites at your cheeks, but your skin is radiant beneath it. You smell like herbs and firewood, like someone who has earned their place at the hearth. You pass the longhouse again. From within comes laughter, the clatter of pottery, the muted notes of another lyre tune. Someone's burning fish again, of course. You make your way to your usual corner, pull the cloak tight, and breathe deeply. The scent of smoke, pine, and birch sap fills your lungs, and for a moment you are entirely, gloriously alive. And now, as twilight softens into a blue so deep it could cradle stars, you rest your head against the pillowy hide of your cloak, warmed from within by mead and memory. The world slows. A breeze moves through the thatched eaves above, cool against your clean skin, whispering like an old lullaby that never learned how to end. The scent of birch and ash still clings to your fingers, grounding you gently in the moment. Whatever comes tomorrow, feasts, frost, or fumbled axe drills, it can wait. For now, you are still. For now, you are safe. You sleep,